Enshrouded is without a doubt one of the most expansive and ambitious survival games I've ever played. Set in a world where you awaken as a Flameborn, tasked with reclaiming the land of Embervale from a deadly shroud of fog. Not only is it packed with hundreds of quests, an amazingly sized, handcrafted world, and pretty much endless scope to reshape the land in whatever way you want, all whilst hosting up to 16 players in the same world, but in their latest Update 7, Enshrouded has now added dynamically simulated water, as well as a whole host of aqua-based additions to go with it. From fishing and new enemies to the beautiful new biome of Veilwater Basin. Very big thank you to Keen Games for letting me try out this update early and for sponsoring this video, where I'll be sharing with you guys 10 things I wish I'd known when playing Enshrouded after Update 7. First up, Enshrouded does not force you into a particular level of difficulty. Though combat may feel very Souls-like by its nature, it doesn't have to match that level of toughness if you care less about fighting in Enshrouded. And you have far more customizability in this game beyond just the simple easy, medium, and hard if you prefer. Before heading into a session, you're free to edit the world's difficulty settings, where you can toggle enemy and boss damage separately, as well as their health, stamina, and perception. You can also make it so they'll never attack you first, determine how quickly they'll attack, and how many can attack at one time. There's also then slider values for pretty much every player stat, from health, dive time, starvation, and much more. But the ones I find most useful to sometimes have toggled off are loot loss on death, as well as sometimes weapon durability. Though to be fair, fixing weapons is simple enough by just visiting a crafting bench. Good for longer expeditions though. But if you're tired of running back to your stuff every time you die, if you're finding it tedious, then there's absolutely no need to keep that as a game feature. So play around with what works best for you, as there is a lot of freedom to toggle things here. Next up, the world of Embervale is huge. I remember early on, after exploring a fair bit, I thought, damn, the world's big. Then I opened up the map and zoomed out a bit, and you can't fully zoom out on everything, you have to kind of drag across after a certain point, and I suddenly realized the small bit of discovered map that I'd been running around in was actually tiny compared to the whole of Embervale, and I thought, how am I ever going to explore all of this? Fortunately, there's 2 core pieces of traversal gear that are going to make life a lot easier in this regard, and they are the grappling hook and glider. The initial variants of these can be crafted very early on at a workbench, entirely from very early scavengeable materials. The hardest thing you'll have to do is get some shroud spores by defeating fell enemies in an enshrouded zone. But build these 2 things as a point of absolute priority, as they are complete traversal game changers. A lot of structures are effectively locked off without a grapple, and glider, well, that pretty much eliminates full damage. Just, watch that stamina bar, because if you run out of stamina mid-flight, you will fall to your death. Now, a little while later, you will be able to upgrade both of these to higher variants as well, with grapple having reduced stamina cost and increased range, and the glider having increased speed and range. That one is going to be seriously important if you want to go on long expeditions. To unlock all of these though is first going to require the carpenter, so keep doing quests for other survivors until being sent to find him, and then complete his quests to unlock better and better gliders. There's also then one skill that you can also acquire fairly early on, which will actually enable you to effectively also climb with a glider. Updraft allows you to gain 1 height boost per glide, and is perfect for going a little further or gliding upwards between ledges. Pair that up with the double jump skill, and you should have a lot less trouble dealing with Embervale's verticality. But proficient in traversal as you may become, there'll often still be times when you just don't want to keep traveling between certain places. Perhaps you've made it to a boss, but realize you're horrifically underprepared, so need to return home and get prepared, only to then need to retrace everything you just did to reach the boss again in the first place. Now, summiting the various spires around the map, of course, will establish a basic network of fast travel points, but the spaces in between those can still be particularly vast. And if you have low stamina or a lower level glider especially, you will absolutely be wanting some specifically placed fast travel points elsewhere. Fortunately, you can build these in the form of flame altars. Literally one of the simplest things to craft in the game, and placing one down as a checkpoint of sorts will enable you to easily fast travel back to it. The only problem is the limited number of altars that you're allowed to have in a game, seen anytime in the bottom left corner of the map. So I'd suggest always leaving having some of these in reserve for this exact purpose, not using every single one up on bases, and make sure to deactivate the ones that are not in use anymore. Still more or less on the topic of altars, these can be upgraded in two ways. Strengthening the altar applies separately to each individual one, simply increasing our building radius, but strengthening the flame is going to be a crucial part to game progression, with each upgrade requiring yet more exotic forms of ingredients, pushing you to explore further afield to obtain each. Upgrading is going to be crucial for building even more altars, but most importantly for increasing your shroud passage level. Now, sometimes you may stumble into a deadly shroud which kills you upon entry, and usually this is a method of keeping you out of higher level areas or just regions of the map that will be built in future updates. Prior to update 7, for instance, the region where Veilwater Basin was just a permanent deadly shroud, but for the vast majority of the map, it'll simply be a case of needing to upgrade your altar first and then trying that region again later. A big part of Enshrouded is going to revolve around building a base, a place of safety to house all our survivors, deposit our stuff, and build workshops that refine materials and allow us to build even more workshops. And whilst we'll get onto building mechanics specifically very shortly, one of the more humble aspects I enjoy about this game is farming and keeping animals. So to start down this series of quests, you'll first have to seek out the farmer, after which you'll then be sent down your own catch-em-all obsession of finding and successfully replicating every plant and animal in this game. Now, not only is this one of the most therapeutic and calming ways to spend time in Enshrouded, but many of the produced ingredients from said plants and animals are gonna be crucial to crafting recipes as you get further and further into Embervale. Now, much like survivors, animals are all gonna need sheltered beds, as well as also a steady supply of food, generally made from other plants we can grow or sometimes meat we can farm. You can breed an entire kennel of dogs, a litter of cats, and plenty more, with update 7 most recently adding capybaras, which you can either keep simply because, you know, they're cute, or to farm for their bristles. Yeah, no, I can't do that. It's looking at me too innocently. So, looking instead at plants, which won't cause you guilt when you farm them. And there's a brand new tool, craftable at the blacksmith, the watering can, which can not only do that, but also provide some encyclopedic knowledge about any plant we hover over. The moisture, preferred soil, and growth rates, the latter of which can actually be manually limited to ensure plants don't grow too big if you don't want them to. An awesome feature, especially when you're trying to cultivate a tidy-looking garden. Now, building in Enshrouded is a place where you can truly get creative. The many different building materials for a range of design types are really just a jumping off point, with the way you can shape each of these, coupled with just how much you can terraform the landscape, being where building really shines. Whilst placing single blocks is of course an option, the construction hammer can instead be used to place a range of prefab building designs, from your basic floors and walls to columns, stairs, and roofs, with survivor craftspeople then trading in an even more impressive host of decorations. The farmer, for instance, sells a bunch of garden furniture, whilst the carpenter is your main go-to for regular furniture. And when all the stuff you need to build all of these amazing things gets a little too complicated, now you can design an organized storage solution, with update 7 adding editable sides, so chests can be labeled in an orderly fashion. If terrain is a little uneven, then the rake is an excellent tool for flattening, with the pickaxe being great for mining out larger obstacles or digging tunnels. Just be sure to visit a workbench often, as those things can break pretty quickly on big projects. If you want to then add, or indeed remove, a more decayed vibe for your builds fitting in with the rest of the world, then once unlocking the collector, you can also use the decay wand tool to apply this. General blocks can also be just as easily removed as placed, so don't be too afraid of trying different combinations. Honestly, there's already so much scope to building here, and the game isn't even at full release version yet, so it's exciting to imagine just how much we'll be able to do with that in the future. There's of course far too much to comprehensively cover on building in this general tips video, but plenty more already out there online to give you some inspiration on the types of things you can build, and I'd also love to explore building more in future videos as well. But one more huge new aspect to building that I absolutely have to talk about in this video is building in water, as well as just the new water mechanics in general. And this game strikes an excellent balance, I think, between practicality and realism when it comes to water. On the one hand, when building below the waterline, particularly in lakes, water feels very much like a near unrelenting force. Leave a tiny seam in a wall and water will pour through, slowly filling your base. Make a hole in the floor and water will flow upwards like a fountain due to the pressure of the surrounding aquatic body. So if you want to build an Atlantis base, you'll have to take extra special care to plug every gap. Fortunately, the realism of this is complemented with some very useful mechanics to control the flow of water. For one, our flame altar will now have an option to remove all water from the building area. This will quickly refill if we're in a lake surrounded by water, say, but it does provide time to put down some foundations, establish a perimeter, and try to somewhat block the returning flow of water, though you may need to do it a few times before you fully get a base established. Then, with that initial challenge out of the way, a brand new block craftable with iron or stone are drains, and these will be crucial to managing the flow of water thereafter, with both the wall and floor variants designed to remove any water above them. Again, this works dynamically. Placing a drain at the bottom of a lake won't create just a rectangular void directly above it, but rather a whirlpool, where the flow of water is drawn directly down to that point. So they're not exactly designed to remove water from an area completely, but more for creating divisions when strategically placed between wet and dry parts of a base that are openly adjacent to one another without necessarily needing walls everywhere. For instance, in this completely undecorated rectangle that I hollowed out of Dragon Dream Lake, I have successfully opened up this huge part of the wall and ensured the surrounding water can't flood the base. These top drains, deliberately slightly lower than the base floor, soak up any water flowing over the top, whilst the drains below do most of the heavy lifting, preventing this outside area from filling much at all and creating a nice waterfall effect on the outside rock face. Speaking of waterfalls, there's also a block that does the exact opposite of drains. Water dispensers will cleverly and endlessly dispense water, but only until they themselves become submerged by it, meaning these should therefore be placed at the exact level you want the water to reach for any water-based features you design. Placing one on a ceiling could therefore fill a room, whilst on the floor will probably get you a puddle. But placing it at the top of an aqueduct structure, for instance, will get you some endlessly flowing, Roman-inspired ways to move water around. Now, it took me a little while to wrap my head around all of the mechanics for how water works and, stop accidentally flooding myself and my base, so hopefully this advice will get you past that point a little more quickly. The other best thing about water though, is it's where fish live. So, naturally, in an update that's all about water, fishing is a big feature now too. In fact, whilst Veilwater Basin and many of the deep lakes of Enshrouded are only accessible in the late game, fishing can be done quite a lot earlier. The Huntress will have some quests relating to this, but a basic fishing rod is actually one of the easiest things to craft in-game. All you then have to do is find a body of water, with plenty of smaller ones dotted around all over the map. So it's a fairly simple minigame, but big catches can actually be ruthless, so you might want to get some practice in early. Simply cast the line into the water, fish will soon swim towards it, tentatively curious at first, but a mouse click prompt will let you know when it's bitten. Then it's a case of wrestling for control, tiring out the fish before it pulls away from our line, using A and D to go the opposite direction to where the fish is swimming, and tiring it out before it pulls away from our line, with the fish themselves of course being an additional source of excellent food. Keep an eye out for disturbed water surfaces as well, signaling particularly excellent catches. Another major aspect to Enshrouded that's going to determine how you play and what you prioritize are character builds, mainly determined by the huge skill tree with specifically labeled segments encircling it. Each of these should give you some idea of just what type of build the various segments lean into, with then a more general color-based split for warrior, wizard, and rogue-based builds. Though some of these perks I'd absolutely recommend for everyone, regardless of build. Double jump is a game changer, as I mentioned earlier, that makes traversal so much much easier, and Updraft is awesome for gliding across Embervale more quickly. But there's also Blink, which replaces dodge rolling with dodge teleporting and looks very cool, Merciless Attack, which is an awesome finisher move on overpowered enemies, and there's a bunch of major skills, but also a lot of smaller stat increases too, that can make a ginormous difference when stacked. And don't be afraid to fully lean into something when you're not fully sure about it, because respeccing later is fairly cheap with the use of runes. In Update 7, the level cap has been increased to 45, meaning your builds can be even more comprehensive, but specific new weapons have been added which might push you towards certain build types. Greatswords are brand new, just waiting to be wielded by a barbarian. Kick is a newly added skill, so now you can literally recreate Sparta and then perform that famous scene. Bow wielders have a bunch of new arrow types to play with, and mages have a whole host of new spells and ways to regen mana. So all around, something new for everyone. And discoverable weapons too, specifically the ones with lore around them, have now been tweaked so that their stats specifically align with said lore. And every lore weapon can be rebuilt at higher levels so that you can still use your favorite weapons later into the game. Okay, technically this last one isn't a starting tip, but it's definitely something major to look forward to and work towards. With water being the core focus of this update, that naturally comes with a stunning new water biome. Veilwater Basin is a high-level area best explored from about level 35 onwards. Found far to the northeast of the map's spawn area, between the towers of Albaneve Summit and Blackmire. Previously and permanently covered in a deadly shroud before the updates, Veilwater Basin is now this lush tropical region complete with lakeside towns, ancient Aztec-inspired ruins, and its own ancient spire found in the middle of Lake Heartblood. As usual, you'll have to navigate through the puzzles and traps of this place, after which you'll have a permanent jumping-off point to glide around the rest of Veilwater. There's also, of course, a bunch of new high-level quests set around the region, which will introduce you to much more of what Update 7 has to offer. And whilst you'll no doubt be tempted to build an Atlantis-inspired underwater base, maybe take a little look around first, as plenty of what already exists in this region can be a good source of inspiration. With the Aztec ruins that the Drak inhabit especially having plenty of flooded temples to explore, but also a new deadly enemy type to fight. The Drak are a species of lizard people seeking vengeance over humanity's past wrongs towards them. Perhaps we found out that they were secretly controlling our society. I don't know, I need to play more of the Drak quests to find out. These guys often wield deadly magical attacks and are generally around level 37. So again, even if you've upgraded your altar high enough to clear the shroud, you might want to level up a fair bit before heading straight into Veilwater. Those specific settings in the difficulty tab, like XP gains, can boost this if you desperately want a region where you can become a pirate or Aquaman. But let me know in the comments what you'll be doing first in Enshrouded Update 7. Whether it's building an underwater base, exploring new dungeons, or just becoming a humble capybara farmer. Thank you again to Keen Games for sponsoring the video. Check out Enshrouded for yourself via the link down below if you don't have it already, and massive thank you to the patrons and channel members as always for going the extra mile to support the channel. I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you in the next one.